viewers.
Yeah, definitely. I should have worn my vote shirt too. I need to switch. I got a
We're
minute.
sending it to you. Don't worry, Miss Johnson. We'll send you one. We'll send you one.
I like it. It's fly. It's got your rose on there and everything.
And it's crucial we send a message out right now, considering what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. Get everybody voting. What's it like out there?
As far as what?
Like climate or just like pandemic, racial strife,
Everything.
all of those things.
Our governor just did an announcement today that we are going back on a lockdown, considering the COVID cases are going up
Yeah.
in Chicago. So now they're doing curfews and restricting a lot of things, as they did probably what 2 months ago, Rebecca.
Yeah.
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 Okay,
It's gonna be a long winter.
so because this book was such a page turner, I kind of wanted to start on time, but before we did so, we kind of wanted to do an introduction. My name is Iesha Malone. I am a fifth grade ELA teacher, owner and co-founder of Rose Café.
I'm Rebecca Silverman. I'm a former elementary school teacher, and I am the creative director and co-founder of Rose Cafe. And I'm Ms. Johnson.
And I am Kim Johnson. I'm the author of This Is My America, a young adult debut that came out this summer. And it's a page turner. And I'll just have you ask me questions or talk. I didn't know if you want me to say more, but
Yeah, so what we usually do with our other talks is we come up with questions as we read the book, and me and her have a dialogue before we talk to you guys. So we already are like embedded in the story. So we ready to ask you questions, but we kind of want to talk a little bit about Rose Cafe and some of the things that we have done over the summer. For those who do not know, we are it's a Black-owned woman bookstore coming to the Roseland community. We are advocating the arts to enhance more people to read more, because what we want to kind of do is cut down on the violence in the neighborhood through positive communication. And the only way we feel we can do that is through mentorship and showing them. So the book cafe would be a great place to start by modeling the behavior that we want to see.
And we don't have a brick and mortar yet. We're in the process of getting that. But this summer, we have been raising money, and we've been giving out books that we have collected, donated books. We've given out over 3,000 books to the Roseland community, which has been awesome. And we love seeing how excited kids get about getting a book. And we've been really excited about how many people have just been excited with us and our mission and vision. So we're excited to get started.
Yes. So in getting started as a teacher, one thing we usually do with annotation is always start with the title. And so I had to find a creative way to get hooked with the title. So I'm thinking like, what is America, right? And when I was reading the book, I could look at America 3 different ways, right? You talked a little bit about America as the problem. We have someone being wrongfully accused of murder. We talked about America as being like, resolution, because now we have innocent X, right? And then we also talked about America in a way where the system was for a main character, because the judge decided to do something that's not usual, which could also be looked at as America, right? So then I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the title and how does that help pave the story?
yeah, I mean, I'm really intentional with my book titles, because I just love how that sort of can immediately jump you into a story and have you understand like what it's all about. I love themes, bringing in different kinds of themes. For me, when I was writing this story, I really thought about the Black American experience and how their American experience doesn't often get reflected, or it looks different based on their own path of how they have to sort of experience America. I thought a lot about the flag when I was writing it. It definitely was during a time period where, when there was critique over thinking about Black Lives Matter, and even thinking of Colin Kaepernick, who was kneeling a bit saying the national anthem, and how that was critiqued, and it was looked at like, how could you disparage our country? How could you, take away the value of our flag and the America? If you don't like America, then you should go someplace else. And I really wanted to sort of put that spin on it, is that in that sense that, as Black Americans, we love America. We love America, even though America doesn't love us. I've heard so many people say that more and more. And that's really where it came from me, is a way to have the voice of a story of a family that even if people don't have this specific lived experience, they know what this life can look like, and also an opportunity just to open the door for people to see what that life is, and maybe understand how certain systems aren't actually built to actually support everyone. They're built for maybe specific reasons, and the criminal justice system is that place. So.
And so along with like the criminal justice system, this story unfortunately isn't something we haven't heard of an innocent Black man being convicted. And we were just wondering, like, how is this story similar to other stories that we've heard, and how is it different? What makes this story different?
It was really important to me for this story to feel real.
Okay.
I didn't want it to be sort of this imaginary experience where people would be like, oh wow, that would be so horrible if it happened. I want people to read it to be like, oh my God, this happens in America. And so I read a lot of cases, interviewed, just conversation, even people that I know who have had some kind of connection with the carceral state, whether that was being pulled over, or whether that's actually having to go through a trial, or even if they didn't go all the way through the trial process, all the way to people who have been convicted for something they either did or didn't do, or if they did do something, that there's sort of a larger story to what led that situation, or even the sentencing was unfair based on the difference in, like, if someone was actually white and had money. Something that Brian Stevens talks about, if you have the capital, you can avoid the punishment. But if you don't have the capital, then you get, life sentences, incarceration in that state. And so I looked at a lot of cases, and what I found was that there's a particular trend that occurred. Usually it was faulty witnesses. Usually it's how the prosecution, the ways in which they bring forward investigation. Usually it's someone who actually doesn't have access to defend themselves. And so they're not actually able to fully have their own investigation team. Oftentimes there's bias involved, where there might be other individuals that they should be considering also a potential suspect, but they have such, laser focus on particular people. And what was really interesting is, after my book came out, I was facilitating a panel on criminal justice, and we were able to bring a guest as a panelist, just to talk about his own experience serving 10 years for something that he didn't do. And when he talked about his story, it could have been This Is My America. It could have been, I could have been said that I was writing about his life and his experience, and how he had basically been followed. And he actually was from Chicago, and he left Chicago because the police kept targeting him and his community. And he felt like if he was going to stay, that eventually he would get into the system, and he moved into a new community. And he was tracked in a way, and it was complete bias. And he was accused of a robbery that he actually wasn't in the area for. But when they arrested him, they saw his track record in his previous background, and then he became the guy. And that's the story I'm telling here. And it's so common. There's also lots of podcasts that I listen to, true crime podcasts, and Curtis Flowers was a case that I followed a lot, that was in the Dark season 2, about a man who's been tried over 6 times, released, tried again, released, but has never actually left prison because they didn't allow him to get bail. He finally actually this year was just released, and a lot of his story is how I thought about this case, and wanting to be able to demonstrate something that felt real, and not something that's just like, oh thank goodness that doesn't happen here.
And it's, when you say that, it's kind of funny that you bring it up, because I also was thinking about it some things you mentioned that's positive that we don't see. Like in one part of the book, Tracy said, "Daddy is life." So, and it kind of stuck with me because me and Rebecca both have our fathers in our life. And obviously I know a lot of people who do not, but I wanted you to kind of talk about why was it so important for Tracy to have such a strong relationship and connection to her dad that it kind of like brought out so much success in her, because it could be viewed as him being not the dad that we always hear about, as we always hear about Black crime and police brutality, but you did talk about like a good father figure in the home. And I was wondering if that was also intentional.
Yeah, it was really intentional. I also wanted to be authentic and real, and that's why I created Tasha as Tracy's best friend, as her being a character who her father has also been incarcerated, and she the relationship, or her even calling him Daddy Greg, the
Mhm.
reasons why she calls him Daddy Greg. I thought that it was really important to still demonstrate how that actually can break a family too. That absence can really break a family. But I also wanted to break the stereotype because we have seen that story so much. It dominates the conversation on the Black family about there being an absence of Black men, Black men, where actually proportionately that's actually not true. And if we look at the impacts of the carceral state in the Black community, there are reasons why that occurs. And so it was really important to me that I break that stereotype in that story, and that I actually make it be about a family. Because when, oftentimes when people are looking at cases or situations or picking up the paper or watching the news and they see a case occur, their sort of immediate thought is like, oh, thank goodness that person is locked up and now I don't have to think about them anymore. And I wanted the reader to see, no, this is a family that loves each other, that cares for each other. And just because her father has a death sentence doesn't mean that he stops being her father. He's still her father, and he is an involved father. He was someone who wanted to provide for his family, wanted to care for his family, took them away from a situation when they were living in Louisiana, had to place them in Texas, and wanted to build a new life. And in an instant, their life completely changed. And I felt like that also was an authentic story, and a story that happens and that people don't actually talk about.
I think I appreciated that in the book. Like, okay.
We also loved, like going back to the family, how, I mean, making it real, showing Jamal how great he was with the little sisters and like the moments of joy. We really liked that too. It made you understand that, they were a family, they were more than just the statistic.
Yeah, I wanted to take away from the white gaze of looking at trauma, of being wanting to like really dig deep of like, oh, tell me how painful, like I want more, like give me that. I didn't want to feed into that trauma. I thought it was important to reflect that the impact of generational trauma for that pain, that someone being taken away from their family. That impact was so important for that to be real. But I also wanted to show the full lived experiences of people, that even through that trauma, even through hard times, you still have love and joy and laughter. Like it was really important, especially as a reader. Like
Mhm.
I didn't want my readers to be traumatized reading this book. Like there are moments that are, emotional for a lot of readers, but I also wanted there to be balanced of lightness, being able to be able to balance of like, that was deep, but then let me like laugh, or let me be like, oh, what are she gonna do with this Quincy and Dean? Like I just wanted those moments to just sort of like settle a reader so that they're not like slapped in the face with like pain, trauma.
Considering that, then you did a big episode with the burning cross, so that was big. So, and it kind of like kept me at another place now that I'm reading. So I was
Mhm.
already there with the burning cross. And so can you talk to us about why you include such a gruesome, for me, picture in the book? Because it could have been different things, right? But
Yeah.
okay, so it's a cross burning in the ground. Okay.
Yeah, that was a really hard choice for me. I went back and forth about how can I reflect the past is the present. And what's the most symbolic thing? Thinking about being in the South, thinking about the roots of white supremacy, how to do that. I'm very intentional about not using slurs in my work, because I think about, when I was a kid in a classroom, in an all white classroom, and how that's used in a book, and that sort of like added to trauma and even feeling that. And so there are just different ways of me thinking about it. And I wanted to have a variety of ways for people to look at white supremacy. That those that are very obvious of like, oh, yep, that is not a good thing. That is, we are not that. I wanted to have that. And I also wanted to have the microaggressions, or like, it's not necessarily a boogeyman. It's like the typical people that are in our lives that we interact with every day. And, I also wanted it to be a story that felt timeless, because it could have been 50 years ago, or it could be 20 years from now. And that element of white supremacy is still there. And so that's why I really felt like that is a symbol. The hood is a symbol that, even it looks different now, it's still there. It's still very alive and thriving and growing in our country.
We talked about our inspiration for the cafe was that this summer, when the book came out, that this summer, not only do we want to create this space for the neighborhood, we also noticed a greater interest in white people wanting to learn more about white supremacy and microaggressions, and want to learn more. And so we were really excited about that, and how everybody is coming together and trying to learn more and fix that. And was there a takeaway that you wanted a white person reading this book that would be different than a Black person, or were you hoping similar?
I think that there's an intersection that's there. I like to write books that are layered, and so that different audiences based on their background will take away different kinds of experiences. I think for me, for my Black readers, it's about being seen and being heard, and having a voice that's there and having that represented, and having that, like, microaggressions be very clear, and being able to demonstrate this is what it feels like walking down the street. This is what it feels like going into a store. What it feels like going into school and have to battle scenarios. And so all of those layers and some sort of subtle signals that were to my Black readers, that was very, very intentional. The lightness and the joy and the happiness and the activism, not being the victim, but actually being the sort of like the person who goes through it. That was all very, very intentional for my Black readers, because I wanted to give them agency, and oftentimes you don't have opportunities to demonstrate that. Then for my white readers, I wanted them to see where their responsibility is, that it's not just about Black people fighting for justice or having to express and talk about racism, that there is a responsibility as a white person. That's why it was so important that I had Dean as a character, that there's a responsibility that even in his best intentions, that like if he wants to be a good person, ally, amplifier, whatever language you want to use, that he has a responsibility that he has to also constantly check himself, learn, understand, and it's not Tracy's responsibility to comfort him and care for him. And then, also with some of the other characters, I also wanted them to see that, again, it is their responsibility. That even there's characters that are white in this story, from police officers to, and I don't want to do spoilers, but bystanders who made particular decisions that were the wrong decisions. But they also still later had opportunities to correct things, even if they're, years later, or even if it's against people who that they are supposed to be allied, for. I really wanted to demonstrate that, like, yes, like it's still your responsibility. This just doesn't happen in a vacuum if you want to be a part of a community. And then I wanted to leave all readers with a call to action. I wanted readers to leave not being like, oh wow, that's an interesting book, or like, oh wow, that was really deep. I want people to be like, I feel like I need to do something. And
Mhm.
that's different for different people based on when they're coming from. And so that's the piece I wanted all of my readers to have.
I noticed also as I was reading that it was traumatic, not traumatic, but big events that led to people finding out what they wanted to do. Um, because when I first met Tracy, I thought she was going to be like a reporter. And
Mhm.
then she obnoxiously said, like, nope, I'm a lawyer. But it wasn't until, like, what happened with her brother. But it's kind of the same thing that happened with Beverly becoming a cop and what happened with her dad. And I was just wondering if you could speak to some of our youth who we may share this with about um, finding yourself through things.
Yeah, I wanted her to go on a journey about who she wants. Hello, am I good? Uh, is my
Yeah,
internet stable? Oh,
Mhm.
good. Okay. I,
cut out for
I
a
guess a lot of
second.
people in my family might be on the internet. I want, I work with young people. I work with college students. I have for almost 20 years. I work with a lot of students, and basically, like, what I do is with my team and the advisors that I work with is help them identify what their goals are, what they want to do, who they are as a person, and as they make informed decisions about their future and how they want to do it. And so, I love to leave these elements in stories, especially because I write for young adult readers, is for them to think about how they can find themselves, and that there are certain things that actually impact your life that sort of like push you into certain kind of decisions. So, Tracy does have interests: journalism, law, organizing. Some of that would never have happened if she hadn't had the lived experience that she did. And so those things do thrust you into, particular decisions and choices that you make. So simple ones that, like, the typical reader probably doesn't recognize about it is, like, even Jamal, him being a track star and wanting to do races individually. I wanted to give him something that actually, with everything is out of his control in his life. He can't control his father. He can't control a lot of decisions that he makes. And runners, I come from a state that running is a really big thing, but it's the one thing that you can do independently on your own. You train on your own. Your time is your time. And I use that sort of even as a model of decisions that he has made even in his life about the things that he wanted to do and is sort of thrust into doing. So
And speaking of Jamal, I think that I think it's interesting the idea of the gender roles. What was your rationale for the main character to be a female and the people that were incarcerated to be both male?
yeah, it's really tricky because I think, thinking about, say, her name, it often doesn't get represented about the impact of Black women or Black trans people who are impacted either by police brutality or just, school to prison pipeline, disproportionate behavioral judgments on Black women. So it really was tricky. But when I looked at innocent cases and looked at incarceration rates, it's so predominant at impacting Black men. I felt like that was the most accurate portrayal that I could do. And then I wanted to honor all of the Black women who are involved in leading these movements, and not just Black Lives Matter. So we think about the three women who, really created Black Lives Matter as a movement. But if we look at around the country over decades, I did well. So you could even go back as far as that. A lot of women leaders who were, fighting for justice. And the young women that I advise and mentor were all, activists and really involved. And myself, even when I think about myself as a young person, the things that I was doing. And so, I wanted to honor women being involved in the work, and how it actually impacts their lives, the decisions that they make, that added burden, that occurs in their fight for justice or equity, or whatever sort of cause that they're fighting for. So, but I did think about that. I did think about, like, how would I represent that? How did I want to represent that? And I think that story does need to be told about the impact of Black women and Black girls. Um, and going through this, sort of similar experience. But for this story, I felt like this was the right sort of mashup combination.
You mentioned a little bit about how we were fighting for justice and things like that. It was a quote. I'm a quote person. Tracy said her fist is always ready to fight. It kind of talks about, but she always watched the clock at the end of the story. Because we almost run out of time. At the end of the story, it kind of said she wasn't racing against time. Right now, with what's going on with the Black Revolution and time, I was wondering if you could talk about, is our fist still tight? Are we letting it go a little bit?
The fist is like this now. It was like this, and I think letting it go, it's exhaustion. There's a lot going on. Part of the pandemic actually helped people have the time. A lot of people didn't have the time. What happened with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, this isn't new. Um, you know, the movement started. Mike Brown, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice. People were in the streets. People were, making the call for justice, but it wasn't extended over a long time period. The pandemic slowed people down. People lost their jobs. Schools were closed. People had time, people had time to go out and do it, and were forced to sort of pay attention. And so, I talk sometimes when I talk about this, that we went from sort of like an incident to a moment to a movement. I do think a movement is too big of a term. When I think about the civil rights movement, I think historically now you can look back on it and you can say that, hey, it was extended over time, that it really was a sort of long-term movement. I think right now we're sort of in a space that we're not quite in a movement. There are organizations that are working, they're in a movement, but I think like the broader country, we're sort of still in the middle. And I think we're exhausted, but we can't, however this election goes, I think if it goes one way, people will be up in arms, and we will truly be thrust into a movement. If it goes another way, what I worry is that it goes another way, and that things can kind of calm down, and we can actually have some sense of sanity going on in our country. But I do worry that then people will relax, and they won't keep having our politicians, having our legislators, having people in our state, our cities, paying attention to issues of Black Lives Matter, and we'll kind of go back to not maybe the normal, but a very close to a normal. And I think that's dangerous, because we actually have an opportunity. When I was writing my book, I wasn't, I've read Angela Davis's Prisons Are Obsolete. That's sort of like has been in my language and my thinking. When I wrote my book, I never thought that it would be even public discourse for people to even say the terms defund the police. Or, and I use other language because I think that when you say defund the police, it just sort of completely terrifies people. I have sort of a different way that I think about it, but like that would never have been in the lexicon, like common lexicon, that people are actually talking about. Like, wait, why aren't we actually, investing in counselors and educators, in mental health support, in food security, and homelessness? Like, why aren't we actually investing in all of those things and adding more funds to that, versus the sort of the opposite, where we're seeing our prison numbers go up? So so I don't think we're quite there yet. I think there's enough energy and enough goodwill and enough buy-in across race, because that's been the problem with the first iteration of Black Lives Matter, is that it was majority only Black people who were really going forward and really sort of strongly believing it. And now you have people who realize, oh, I get it now. I get why you're saying, why we have to say Black Lives Matter. Where there's people before who didn't understand and felt like, wait, why can't it be all lives matter? That kind of thing.
I think a good time. We only have 2 more minutes. I wanted to go through the questions. We have a few questions in the chat. And this question is, why did you decide to tell a story through fiction instead of nonfiction?
I love nonfiction. At one point I thought I was going to be a faculty member and had started a PhD program, which I stopped when I realized that wasn't quite the route that I wanted to go. So I love research. I love nonfiction. But I'm a young adult writer. I've never actually considered myself a writer before. It wasn't until the past 9 years that I started actually realizing I love storytelling, and that it's a way for me to actually use my advocacy. And so I could see myself doing nonfiction at some point, but I do think that there's power in making it accessible to people through fiction. I can talk about facts and figures and why people should care about certain things, but if you actually, go into someone else's shoes and, view through their lives, I do think that there is power in story.
Absolutely.
Is that all for the questions?
Yeah. Yeah, for right now.
Well, it's
okay, there you are. Sorry.
I don't know. It's bad connection this time. I don't understand that, but we made it through, and it was a very good interview, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you.
And I really do appreciate you having this talk with us. And we did want to promote people who is interested in reading your book to buy it from us, because right now we are trying to raise money to open up a brick and mortar. And this is one of the reasons why we do the talk, to help each other out. We help sell the books, but we just would like for people to buy it from us just until we are able to open up our brick and mortar.
Well,
and we really appreciate you talking with us, because you're
I just want to say I wish you all the absolute best. I think books are so important, especially in, our communities, and they do make the difference all in the world. And I just remember as a young person, just having my own book, like that meant the world. And so like just supporting, everything that you're doing, and I wish you all the best.
Well, we thank you again, and we will send you an email, because we want to send you a sweater.
Yes, I want it so bad.
We will talk soon, because we would like to stay in tune with things that you're writing, and possibly again.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Okay, thank you. Y'all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too.